This is the Greek play The Clouds, written by Aristophanes. It's a comedy. And there's this guy, his name is Strepsiades, and he's got a son named Phidippides, who has incurred some debt. His son's hobby is horses, and it's expensive to pay for horses. So Strepsiades, by the way, I'm going to call Strepsiades Streppy, and I'm going to call Phidippides Dippy, because they sound cool. So Dippy, his hobby is horses, and his dad, Streppy, is in debt from it. So he says, I've got an idea. I'm going to send my son Dippy to a thinkery where he's going to learn the unjust logic. And the unjust logic is a way of arguing, performing rhetorical gymnastics so that he doesn't have to pay any debt. He can just get out of debt using his words. Clever, right? So they go to the thinkery. But here's the thing. Dippy refuses. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He's happy with his life. He doesn't want to learn the unjust logic. So Streppy goes to the thinkery himself to learn it. And there he meets Socrates, who is, funny enough, in a basket. He says, Socrates, why were you in the basket? He says, I walk on air and contemplate the sun. Yes, you do, Socrates. Yes, you do. And they're engaged in some interesting activities over at the thinkery. I mean, one time Socrates made wax slippers to see how far a flea could jump. And then they had an argument whether a gnat makes sounds from its head or its and they firmly concluded that it makes sounds from its Very interesting stuff and how they spend their time. So Streppy asks Socrates about this unjust logic and how he can learn it. And they have a lot of arguments together, like Socrates disproves Zeus in favor of a vortex of air. So Socrates summons the clouds, this chorus of clouds, this divine creature. And the clouds tell Streppy, if you learn the unjust logic, you will live the most happy, the most enviable life. And Streppy says, sign me up. So Socrates starts teaching Streppy the logic. But the teacher and the student are not compatible. They really don't like each other. At one point, Socrates calls Streppy an insufferable dolt. So it's not going that well. He even makes, at one point, Socrates makes Streppy lay underneath a flea-ridden blanket. Maybe a message that this type of education is dirty. Guess they didn't like lawyers back then either. So Socrates basically kicks out Streppy. Streppy is really angry, comes back home, hasn't finished his learning, and once again tries to argue to Dippy to go and learn the logic. And Dippy this time he gives in. His son gives in and says, okay, I'm going to go and learn it because you won't leave me alone. But, Father, the time will come when you'll repent of this. So they walk back to the thinkery, and interestingly enough, they get to witness an argument between the just logic and the unjust logic. And it's a lot of rhetorical punches. It's quite an interesting argument. One of my favorite parts was about chastity, and the just logic says, if you're chaste, you'll get a lot of rewards. Peleus won a sword and a wife, a beautiful wife, Thetis, for being chaste. And the unjust logic response says, yeah, he did, but he didn't please his wife in bed. So she left him. Now, how do you argue against that? So the unjust logic wins, and Dippy is taken in to learn it. Streppy is like, yeah, I'm so happy. My son is going to be able to get me out of debt. And here's the ironic thing. Streppy visits, while his son Dippy is learning the unjust logic, Streppy visits the creditors and argues out of the debt himself. He didn't even need his son at the time to learn the unjust logic. He already had learned enough. So, how's this going to turn out for Streppy? Not good at all. At one point, his son has learned the unjust logic. He comes back. Dippy beats up his father. And Streppy is running out into the street saying, help me, my son is beating me. And Dippy makes an argument that it's right for sons to beat their fathers. Very perverted. So instead of owning up to his action, what does Streppy do? He burns down the thinkery intending to kill everyone inside. Oh, Streppy. Be careful what you wish for. There might be unintended consequences.